spending some time with us, with you once again. The Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University, Wilmington Works, Danny Pommel's, Noah Levick, Ben Berry. You know the principles. We're here after another victorious night for your 76ers. 6 straight wins, culminated by Joel Embiid getting adorned with happy birthday, a cake on the plane presented by George Niang, a virtuoso performance. 36 and 18, 4 blocks, 3 assists. Oh, and we wake up today or even go to bed last night with Joel Embiid as the favorite, according to PointsBet, in the MVP race. Noah, how good of timing did we have having our MVP discussion on the last podcast to set us up for today, where Joel Embiid goes out and gives Cleveland the absolute business, and that obviously turned a lot of heads, and you could say it was his defensive work that really was the most remarkable thing last night.
Yeah, you were on the money with just having the gut feel that things were really moving strongly in the Embiid direction, and boy, that's a quick shift.
I know it was 5-1 last week, 5-1 for him.
Yeah, I guess you could point to a number of factors as to why something that extreme would happen. Sure, Embiid has been playing great. The Sixers have won 6 straight. You know, Denver's on the slide, but man, it's hard to imagine something that dramatic, you know, before the, to me, social media era, before the, you know, widespread prevalence of odds and, you know, people who care about that kind of stuff. But hey, regardless, really good for Joel Embiid. Really great if you're a Sixers fan who wants him to win this MVP award.
I actually don't love it a little bit. I do like the way it used to be with a little bit of mystery surrounding who was in the front of the race and how many people were in contention and things like that. But now the weekly updates, and of course the betting was always there, but the NBA actually showing an MVP ladder is just like a little bit. It's a lot. I mean, just to be keeping up with it and staying on top of it. I like the way it used to be with a little bit more mystery.
I think I'm with you. I think it's just the reality is, you know, 100 voters, and I would say a very large majority of them are plugged in on Twitter and social media out of necessity because it's their job to, you know, tweet out updates about the team and tweet out their articles and all that. So I think even if you try to avoid some groupthink or you try to avoid being swayed by whatever the trend seems to be or whatever the popular prevalent arguments are, it's somewhat unavoidable. And perhaps that is helpful to Joel Embiid, where when things are justifiably moving in his direction, that happens at just such an extreme level. Now, obviously, the question is, will that remain the case throughout the season? And clearly, he has a lot of control over that. As I said last time, it's just hard to imagine the Sixers having 55, 56, 57 wins and Embiid not winning this award, especially now, given how greatly things have, you know, improved if you're rooting for him to win this race. But in terms of the on-court stuff, yes, he continues to look like an MVP player. As you noted, the two-way impact was special yet again last night. Cleveland without Jared Allen, who's out with an eye injury, but Evan Mobley is far from a pushover as an opposing center. He's, you know, a player who looks like he's going to be making all-defensive team after all-defensive team. And Embiid was just thoroughly superior to him throughout the night. Started spectacularly, 15 points in the first quarter. And of course, as most teams do, Cleveland then recognized, oh, we need to send more double teams his way and just sell out on trying to slow down the scoring rate a little. But Embiid, though it wasn't a good night for him as a passer, just was fantastic defensively, hit the shot the Sixers needed him to, and ultimately led them to a really great win. They're 6 straight, and an impactful one in the standings picture as well. Moves them 4 ahead of Cleveland for the 3rd seed in the East. keeps them the game back of Boston, who edged out the Timberwolves last night. But regardless, standings or just in a vacuum, yet another Sixers win that I think you could classify as a high-quality one.
And it didn't come without some luck. And you mentioned Evan Mobley being a pushover because it was a reverse charge call that kept Embiid in the game and helped them salt this game away down the stretch. And the controversy surrounding the charge call itself, which was more probably determined to be a flop than an actual push off from Joel Embiid. But on top of that, he made a basket on the play where he supposedly or didn't, as they reversed the call, pushed off on Evan Mobley. But that basket didn't go on the scoreboard for a little bit. So it was presumed that the Cavaliers were within 3 points. They actually were within 5. So that whole thing had to get meted out. And Joel's surprised face when they reversed the call was definitely funny. I do want to add something on this MVP thing before we get into more of last night's game and the excitement of it. I think there's definitely a lesson in this whole MVP situation with Joel, because when he pursued and made it known to so many people and whoever would listen that that was one of his goals, which is nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you got to work quietly toward things that are important to you, or kind of keep it close to the vest until you get closer to the goal, because here he is just going about his business, not really entertaining the MVP race as much. And now suddenly he's the front runner just by putting his head down and going to work and ignoring kind of the outside noise of, are you getting snubbed and how come you're not being recognized for all of the prowess and the accolades and the things, properly recognized for those things. So he ignores the MVP race, goes about his business, and suddenly, like you said, in 1 week, it goes from 5-1 that he's the front runner. So I think there's something to be said there about the fact that, you kind of put your head down and go to work and kind of things come your way, which is a great approach to life in general. But getting into last night's game, what did you make of that overturn call? And it's the people in Sea Caucus along with the referees who kind of make the determination there. I thought it was a push off. So many people did. When I looked closely as they overturned it, it could have been. It definitely looked more like a flop because of the way Mobley fell back. But a real borderline call, and the Sixers getting the benefit of the doubt. Situations like that, you can kind of see why some opposing fan bases might not be the biggest fans of Joel Embiid, because they think he gets away with, some foul calls and kind of hunts free throws. But that is a big misnomer about his game. But what did you make of that play right there? And it probably is what determined the outcome.
I don't know if I'd go that far. The Sixers did have the lead, and
it was a tight game.
It would have felt more like a toss-up, right? If Embiid got ejected there, and then the Sixers presumably try to survive with PJ Tucker at center, which went okay early in the fourth quarter because it was a shootout and both teams were super successful offensively. But regardless, massively impactful call. I thought it was a bad call to overturn. I would have been absolutely furious if I was a Cavs fan. I thought JB Bickerstaff was correct to be on the officials essentially the rest of the game. And you don't want to overstate the whole notion of a precedent and whatever. Each game is, treated on its own merits. But man, just the fact that the justification for overturning it was the contact was marginal, to me, that's so arbitrary and not the way you should be adjudicating, what validates an overturned call. I think, the call on the floor is what you're supposed to trust. And then if there is really compelling, strong, borderline obvious evidence against it, that's when you overturn a call, right? So I just don't love the notion that you can look at it on replay and say, that's marginal. It's not substantive. Like there's such a fine line between those things. And the guy on the floor said it was substantive contact. And I think I agree. And I don't think the fact that, yes, Evan Mobley sold the call and wanted Joel Embiid to foul out negates the fact that he was shoved, by Joel Embiid's forearm, and the contact wasn't light. Like, it was actual impactful contact there by Embiid. So I understand you don't want to encourage flopping, and I think it's not too hard to make the case that Mobley flopped, but there's flopping throughout every game. There's flopping on both sides of that matchup. And yeah, if I was a Cavs fan, I would have been really ticked off and felt like my team, would have had a great chance to win that game if not for a very bad overturned call that sure seemed like, star treatment for the opposing team's best player. You don't want to highlight that as the only thing that decided last night's game. The Sixers did a ton well. Embiid was truly special on both ends of the court. The Sixers, got good performances from their number 2 and number 3 guys. Shake Milton stepped up off the bench. There's so much that decides every game. It doesn't come down to one play, but man, that was a very, very important play. And from where I'm sitting, I strongly disagree with how it was handled. And yeah, as you noted, part of that was just they messed up the whole situation with actually putting on the scoreboard that was supposed to be 2 points. That's just poor game management by the officials not to ensure that once the action resumes, that those 2 points are actually on the board. And you could, I think, say that the teams not being aware of that does actually perhaps slightly change how they're approaching things. It's just not something that should happen. So I think they really mangled that one, and the Sixers were a bit fortunate, to say the least.
And of course, that comes on the heels of Fred VanVleet and his $30,000 fine, just obliterating the officials after one Raptors game. And, they're human. They make mistakes. It happens to everybody. But if I'm a Cavs fan, Joel Embiid is frying us. He's banking in threes. He's scoring on all 3 levels. He's playing defense and blocking dunks on the other end, and he's getting the benefit of the calls. You almost want to walk out of the arena. Like what? Like, it's almost as if like everything's working against you. And to have it, this unicorn type of player with perfect from the free throw line, 12 of 19 from the floor. He's got almost 20 rebounds. He's getting calls in the crunch time. I mean, like, I don't know, man. It's just one of those moments where you're happy it's all working in your favor, but definitely some some kind whistles there, for the Sixers and Joel Embiid. But the biggest misnomer out there, and my son tried to come with this argument the other night, is that Embiid's a foul baiter and he does like that, swing through, rip through move in order to induce fouls and things like that. I'm like, you're not watching the games. So I don't even want to have a conversation with you anymore because you're just repeating some rhetoric you saw from someone else. Embiid is much more than that, and his unicorn nature definitely gives him some. Our producer Ben Berry saying he's a flopper and foul baiter. That is not true because Embiid induces fouls, and sometimes he does hunt fouls, but there's so many more aspects to his game. Like I said, scoring on all 3 levels in the defensive end. So miss me with that. But a great game for the Sixers to win, as you mentioned, keeping some distance between them and the Cavaliers, between that 3rd and 4th position. As it stands right now, if you had to put your money on it, 6 out of the next 7 on the road for the 76ers, are they the 3 seed, the 2 seed, or the 1 seed here when the season ends?
That's tough. I don't think 1 is realistically in the picture. I find it hard to imagine the Bucks will drop that many games, regardless of how they approach the final stretch. 2 and 3 is very tough.
Pretty tight, yeah.
Yeah, I almost do want to lean to the Sixers. Find a way to get the 2 seed. The next 2 here, a back-to-back, are,
and not that even matters and what happens in the postseason necessarily. Matchups are important in the first round, but we've seen them finish as the 1 seed and not get where they should be. We've seen them finish as the 4 seed and get close. I mean, who knows? But continue your point, please.
Yeah, I think generally it doesn't hurt to get a higher seed as long as there's not some matchup that changes that's obviously preferable, and of course as long as you're not recklessly endangering your star's health. I mean, I think even back the last postseason, and it ended up being quite costly, in my opinion, that the first round matchup was the Toronto Raptors because that was such a difficult series. You had the
Mm-hmm.
Matisse Thybulle ineligibility issue, and then you drew the Miami Heat in the second round, which was not easy and didn't go so well. So, yeah, I hesitate to make a definitive call on two or three. I haven't looked super closely at Boston's schedule, but they've definitely been playing worse than the Sixers as of late. And the Sixers'
Sixers' longest winning streak in the league right now.
longest streak in the league, good opportunity to extend it to 8 games here because they've got Charlotte and Indiana up next. Based on the recent evidence, the Indy game, the primary concern will be defense. And
Let's hope it's not in the 150s again.
yeah, you figure on the second night of a back-to-back, if it again is similar stylistically, that doesn't bode too well for the Sixers. But I would not be surprised at all if they win 8 straight games and keep moving in an encouraging direction where 55, 6, 7 wins are legitimately on the table. So I think I do gut feel wise lean to the Sixers actually pulling out the 2 seed, but would not surprise me if it's super close. If Boston, finishes strong, obviously they're an excellent team, but that's going to be a fascinating race to watch here, both the 2-3, and then of course it's relevant what's happening below the Sixers to figure out exactly what all the matchups will be in that Eastern Conference. But last night was a fantastic win, just I think to firmly push the Cavs out of that number 3 picture, barring something very improbable.
Hey, we want to remind you Wilmington University and students are in the game. Upskill in fields like cybersecurity, fintech, healthcare, and education, in person or online. Get in the game at Wilmington University. Find us at wilmu.edu. Hey, if you are injured for over 70 years, Lundy Law has been the #1 personal injury law firm in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Their services are exemplary. Their results are exceptional. Call 1-800-LUNDY-LAW to get the money you deserve. Of course, it's time to rush to new rewards at Rivers Casino. We tell you this every week. There's a whole new way for you to earn, redeem, and level up your rewards. Get your new Rush Rewards card and get more out of your game at Rivers Casino, Philadelphia. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, Noah, here we are. The Ides of March are officially here. I know I've been teasing that for a couple of podcasts, but Sixers with some tremendous momentum pushing toward that second spot. Joel Embiid, some tremendous momentum as it pertains toward the MVP race. And he's the league leader in scoring. James Harden is the league leader in assists. It's all coming together in a way that shows the reward of what diligence and staying the course can give you. Noah, is this Sixers team trending in a way that you are willing to change some of your predictions about where they might finish from the beginning of the season? Have you considered some of that? Have those things entered your mind?
Honestly, I feel decent about the preseason picks right now. We'll see how it all pans out, but I think certainly when they were 1-4, 12-12, people who might have heard our preseason podcast would think I was way too high on the Sixers, but I do believe I said mid-50s in wins and that they would lose a very tight, likely 6 or 7 game series in the Eastern Conference Finals. To me, that continues to appear the most probable outcome. I think, of course, they have been very impressive post All-Star and conquered some major tests that give you greater reason for postseason optimism. But man, the Milwaukee Bucks are still an awfully difficult team to beat, and the Sixers continue to struggle with putting together complete games.
They
I think
picked up Goran Dragic. Does that concern you at all as far as their depth?
not a ton. No, I think the Sixers, actually, their second unit has overall been better than I expected post All Star. Last night was not a good one, just purely in terms of scoring. Shake Milton was the main guy, shot 4 for 5 from the floor, and 2 assists and 0 turnovers, which wasn't the norm for the Sixers on a night where they were rather careless with the ball. And I think just the ability to have guys chip in when needed. And as of late, Doc Rivers seemed to have a excellent gut feel for his team, with what buttons to push, and do you go House or Niang, and is this a Milton night? Like, can you ride, Harden and 4 bench guys for an extended stretch? There are just a lot of factors with the second unit, both in terms of the players and in terms of how they're coached, that encourage me and don't make me think they're going to be, severely inferior to another team's bench in the postseason. So I think that's good. I think, most of the factors that you analyze for the Sixers, hard to say anything besides this is moving in a great direction. They're literally the NBA's best team since early December. But yeah, you got to get through the Bucks and Celtics, most likely, to win the Eastern Conference. And I think I still lean toward that being slightly less likely than likely. The Sixers obviously are 100% dependent on continued good luck with injuries. Maybe this is the year they finally get it, but they 100% need that because, for all the good stuff we've got to say about their depth, I don't think we'd have much confidence in them to beat a top tier opponent if Embiid misses time, if Harden isn't 100%, even if Tyrese Maxey or PJ Tucker or other impactful players were to be injured for a postseason series. So yeah, don't want to sound at all pessimistic about the Sixers. I'm becoming more and more optimistic. The more
No,
games.
we get it. You're just trying to put a dose of realism on everything.
Yeah, just purely in terms of what is the prediction. I think I do stick with the preseason prediction, which again, at one stage probably looked way too optimistic, and now I think plenty of folks could fairly argue, oh, you should be higher on the Sixers. You should think they're destined for the NBA Finals. Would not be shocked at all if this team does make the Finals, but I think prediction-wise, still am going to say that it does not happen, and of course, maybe they will prove me wrong.
They, as a team, have something to prove, so you're definitely not wrong with waiting for them to show you that they can do that which they hope for. And I think that we are kind of at the point where we always heap so much criticism on so many aspects of what the Sixers are doing, how they're executing, the way they are making decisions within the organization. Do we need to give some praise to Doc Rivers and Daryl Morey for bringing this thing together in a way that maybe some people wouldn't have thought that it would come together? Like you said, best team in the league since December. Their record since the All-Star break. They're now 20-12 on the road on the season. Some of these things aren't happening by mistake. And yes, they have great players, but part of that and the decision-making execution, the credit goes to Daryl Morey, Doc Rivers, and that brass and coaching staff. So are we overlooking that aspect of it, of giving them some accolades for what they've been able to accomplish?
I don't think I disagree with that. I think I know there's a tendency to not be thrilled with the Sixers draft, sort of rue draft misses. Man, Paul Reed was the 58th pick in the NBA draft. Like, that is just tremendous value. And to Daryl Morey's credit, obviously he was high enough on Reed to take him, but even throughout the process of his development, he's just been so, openly joyful when Paul Reed succeeds. And now I think a lot of his potential is coming to fruition, albeit not his best night in Cleveland, but clearly over the last month or two, I think the consensus seems to be that he is playing exceptionally well and giving you reasons to believe that he can help the Sixers in the playoffs. And then, yeah, the Anthony Melton pickup, I think, just makes the Sixers look like a more well-rounded basketball team. I think PJ Tucker after a shaky / slow start to the season, has shown you the winning player qualities that were, much touted. Even last night, just scrapping for offensive rebounds, securing those extra possessions, and being able to guard, centers, right? It enhances the Sixers' defensive versatility, where Embiid can be in more of a roaming role, which increases the chances that he pulls off those, spectacular highlight blocks. So for sure, I think Daryl Morey's offseason, at the time, we said it looked like an excellent one. And, I think there were probably people who doubted that assessment at one stage. Sure looks like Morey did a lot of good stuff this summer to make the Sixers a better team. And we'll, TBD on the Jalen McDaniels Matisse Thybulle trade. McDaniels did end up missing the game with this hip injury, and we'll see if he can, slide back into this rotation healthy and be in a good spot for his first ever NBA playoffs. But Doc Rivers, I think I most strongly agree with your point there. I think early in the year, there were quite a few people who thought he was unworthy of this job and that the team was tuning him out, and that the Sixers were essentially destined to fail with him as head coach. And I think we said at the time, a lot of it still hinges on the playoffs, and there are valid questions about his abilities as a playoff coach. But man, since the last few months, I think just time after time, he's nailing it every game. He's making really good adjustments with fundamentally changing defensive schemes, switching matchups, switching pick and roll coverages, and just the gut feel seems to be better than it was a year or two ago, which makes sense. He's had more exposure to these players and these core pieces and understands their strengths and weaknesses. But I even go back to the Milwaukee game. They snapped the Bucks 16-game winning streak. And for the majority of that game, I imagine many fans were mystified that George Niang was playing so many minutes and that Daniel House was not. And it wasn't going too well. And then George Niang ends up making 4 threes in the fourth quarter. You could argue, okay, there didn't seem to be that much logic in playing Niang, and maybe Rivers was a bit fortunate, but there seemed to just consistently be examples of him understanding his team and the tricky decisions. He's getting them right on a large majority of nights. I think he's coached very well and is a big reason the Sixers are, pulling out close games and winning on the margins. I think their head coach deserves probably more credit for that than he is getting, quite honestly. So, I think those are sound points, and we don't want to oversell that and say the Sixers season is a grand success. I think Morey and Rivers would both tell you the year will be judged by what happens in the playoffs. But those two guys have most definitely done a lot of strong work that has the Sixers in a nice spot at this point in the year.
Yeah, you mentioned Rivers having more familiarity with the players on the roster. That KYP, know your personnel mentality is showing and paying dividends for this team. Situational awareness and pushing the right buttons, pulling the right strings, putting the right people in place when it matters. Like you said, the playoffs are where it will be measured. But you have to like where the Sixers team is heading, winning in a variety of different ways. You mentioned the win over the Bucks. They come back from down 18 last night, down 13, showing resiliency, desire, fight, and feeling like they're in every game and have what it takes to win every game. So, I still think, like I said on the last podcast, that this team has flaws, and there will be, I'm going to just say it right now, there will be nights where they beat a team and maybe lose the next night in the playoffs in a series by double digits or something like that. There will be inconsistent nights, but I think that this team is being tested and built in a way that they'll be able to bounce back from those, things that happen to maybe all NBA teams. Maybe not, like I said in previous discussions, not the 72-10 Warriors or 73-9 Warriors or the 72-10 Bulls or whatever. I just feel like they're showing me the Sixers team that they're built, battle tested, and have what it takes to be resilient when the playoffs come. Hopefully that continues to show itself. Some tough games coming up. We saw Steph go for 50 last night. There's still the Warriors on the slate, the Suns, different games that are going to show how prepared this team is. But, what are you going to say about a 6-7 game winning streak? Like, what are you going to say about that?
Yeah, no, it's been super impressive. And yeah, I think the term we've used a lot is resilience. And you saw that again last night, where I think the effort was concerning, and the Sixers fell down by 13 points when Maxey made a little runner, and then just no one got back on defense, and they conceded an easy dunk, and Rivers calls timeout, and then just boom, 14-0 run. The supporting cast members who were disappointing in the first half, started nailing big shots, and Embiid
some good ball movement was the product of that. They showed some of that chutzpah, that intestinal fortitude.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's just they don't doubt themselves at all, really, regardless of how large the deficit is. And once they start making a run, then they sort of habitually start playing the right way a lot more, right? The ball movement increases, their pace is better, they're more diligent about transition defense. They're not making any, mental mistakes. There are zero miscommunications. It's just really fun and beautiful basketball to watch. So I think that has emerged as a cool element of what this team brings to the table. I go back to early in the season, Rivers said basically, to paraphrase, like, one of the most important aspects of coaching is clarity and your players knowing what is expected of them. And I just think that is the best it has been during his time. And him and his coaching staff deserve a lot of credit for it. And also the players do for working through growing pains in various ways. So I think defensively, they've tweaked their points of emphasis this year. I wrote about this recently, where they are very determined not to allow anyone to drive middle. They're icing every pick and roll, and there's more on the low man's plate. They've got Joel Embiid, on most pick and rolls, kind of up to touch, and then they've got the low man ideally tagging the roller. They're asking their guards to fight through every screen. They're switching 1 to 5 at every timeout, 1 to 4 in most other situations. So you just tick off these various rules that, me and everyone on the Sixers knows what they are. And I think that eliminates, issues with guys maybe not being totally sure of how to handle a situation, or not having complete confidence in, can I execute in this spot? The fundamentals, like, everyone is on the same page. I think defensively, clearly is still, their worst end of the floor, but they're an improved team there regardless. They've been really good in clutch moments defensively. And then offensively, obviously it doesn't hurt to have guys like PJ Tucker and Tobias Harris who totally buy into relatively low usage roles and are all about just doing whatever's possible to enhance the star talent. So I think the clarity, the team identity, all of that is as good as I've ever seen it in this era of Sixers basketball. And it doesn't hurt, right, that the essence of their identity is what Brett Brown said. Joel Embiid is the crown jewel, and we'll go as far as he takes us. But a lot of these other factors related to what is expected of everyone else and how do we approach the game night after night with X's and O's and, more kind of big picture amorphous stuff. I'm really impressed by that. And I think give credit to Rivers, give credit to a lot of these players just being super team first and adaptable. And definitely all of that makes me encouraged about the Sixers heading into the playoffs, albeit, not yet convinced that they are absolutely going to crush, the Bucks or the Celtics by any means. But yeah, all of these factors, excellent stuff, and just the development of those storylines throughout the season, I think, has been neat to observe. And now it's almost going to be time to put that to a more high stakes test.
Woo, boy, April will be here soon. The playoffs and regular season, they're all coming to a head. Noah, it's exciting. What do you have popping on the website as the Sixers have a little time off here before their next battle with the Charlotte Hornets?
Yeah, so observations on that game last night. As I noted, went into a bit of depth on like just what are the Sixers' core defensive principles. Why has it been helpful that everyone kind of understands those? Are there instances in which those might not work so well, et cetera? And also just the notion of the team togetherness and some of the ways that's manifested. So a story on kind of those two big topics. But yeah, today we'll see what the deal is with Jalen McDaniels, if he is indeed available to play his former team in the Charlotte Hornets. I think that's the main stuff of note. Then we'll pick things back up with yet another back-to-back, as there is little rest ahead in the Sixers schedule. But as I said, I think plenty of reasons to think that they are capable of sweeping another back-to-back and extending this winning streak to 8 games.
7 of their 8 on the road starting last night in Cleveland, a victory and a monster Joel Embiid performance to kick things off. Be sure to check out Noah Levick's work on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. Follow him on all social media platforms at Noah Levick. I'm at D Pomels at NBCS. For our producer, Ben Berry, I'm Danny Pomels. We will see you next time on the Sixers Talk Podcast.